Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, so in the last video that I did, I was focusing mostly on Lauren and John's double down video. Okay, the double down video is a reference to Lauren's actual 9-hour stalking video. Okay, um, I've had some more time to think about what I really feel. I think a lot of the thoughts I gave off in the last video were kind of rough draft, sort of off the cuff. I've given it a little more thought. And I've decided to kind of look more closely at Lauren's original Stalker video. Um, and I think I have a little better idea of what I really feel. Like, say, trying to put myself, I struggle with this. It's not always easy, but I really, even in the worst cases, like, say, even in a case like Corey Richins, I'm still working on Corey Richins. Okay. I can't quite put myself in her shoes. I know I can do it. I need to focus more on that and give not trying to like the court system's going to send her to jail, okay, but I'm trying to understand what was going on from her point of view. Okay, so I'm not into this thing where I'm trying to find people innocent or I'm trying to say they're not really guilty. It's more like if you want to learn about crime or events around true crime, you want to try to understand what was going on in that person's situation. You know, like how did they feel in that situation? Put yourself in their shoes and try to understand them as they feel their experience. You know what I mean? So I hope people can understand that. And I feel like in the last video, I think I was getting somewhere, but I don't believe I fully was putting myself in Lauren and John's shoes. Okay, I want to, but it's a process for me. And I think it helped for me to have a couple days to think about it and also to look more closely at Lauren's 9-hour stalker video. So after watching carefully the 9-hour stalking video, and now I'm really trying to do it with an open mind, okay? My first impression is that I'm afraid people are going to try to go straight to labeling Lauren as narcissistic. Okay, that's my fear, and I know it would be easy to do that. Okay, and it might even be easy to do that to Dr. John because I feel it's so embarrassing in their double down video. They talk so much about celebrity and relating themselves, sort of seeing themselves as related to celebrities. And so that's a real red flag for narcissism. And I feel bad because, you know, I don't really think that they are narcissistic people. I mean, I think they have some narcissistic issues coming up. Okay. And I think it's driven by a lot of stress. I think it's the novelty of being a big time YouTube channel. I think that's going to bring out narcissistic issues in people. But you know, here's my feeling. Okay, now let me please say this. Okay, and I hope you don't judge me too hard. Okay, I have actually been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, and it sucks. Okay, this happened when I was 18 years old. I'm in my 50s now. Okay, I'm much older now. I don't know if I would qualify for that diagnosis now, but believe me, okay, I've had my issues, and I consider myself to still have that tendency. Okay, so. I, you know, I mean, I would be happy to label them as narcissistic, but I'm going to say something here, okay? When you have a mixture of different personality characteristics, okay, even if you can see something like narcissism, you still have to look for what is the main personality characteristic, okay? Because please, newsflash, okay? Even people who are borderline, even people who are, let's say, histrionic, people who are even just drug addicts, you know, they have addictions or they're antisocial. Lots of personality disorders can show up with a lot of self importance, self absorption, maybe grandiosity. You know what I mean? Those things can show up in a lot of different personality disorders. And I think if we focus so much on narcissism and psychopath, these are like the big, you know, the popular categories. What I'm afraid of is we're not going to notice something that's maybe more important that would be, I would say, a bigger key to how to maybe try to approach Lauren. You know, like imagine people that care about Lauren, let's say real friends, you know, how would they reach out to her? You know, and I don't think to see just narcissism, I don't think that's really the issue here, to be quite honest. And I really watched her video carefully. And I hope this doesn't turn people off, okay? But I see her more in a paranoid situation, okay? And when you say paranoid, that's another word that is such a turnoff. When you accuse somebody of being paranoid, they're not going to want to talk. They're not going to want to entertain that because it's such a disrespectful word in a way, you know. But hopefully, you know, if anybody close to Lauren could maybe think about it, how to approach her. You can look at paranoia in a different way. It's not so much like, oh, you're a paranoid person. You can look at it more as you're in a paranoid situation, okay, where you find yourself in a paranoid mindset, okay. And I think, you know, just given all the stress that Lauren's been in, and I think maybe just I don't know, the novelty of just having such a large channel and maybe becoming more of a famous person, you know, that may be sort of arousing a lot of like paranoid, sort of her own paranoid issues, you know, her paranoid mindset, basically. So anyway, what do I mean by paranoid? Because, and please, nobody take this as like an insult to anybody. Okay, people can be in a paranoid situation. Okay, so what does it mean to be paranoid? At least maybe not so much in the sense of like paranoid schizophrenia, but I'm talking about more like paranoid personality disorder, or maybe because your circumstances, they're making you become symptomatic in that spectrum of a personality disorder. Okay, so what does that really mean? Okay, so in that context, all right, what paranoid really means is that number one, you have a lot of problems misinterpreting people and overreacting to people. Okay, misinterpreting people and overreacting to people. Okay, perceiving more threat and danger than what is really there. Okay, you tend to perceive more actual threat and danger. You feel like you're in danger. You feel very threatened when in reality, it's not that big of a deal. Okay. And so when does it reach the level of being like almost like diagnosable? It's when other people look at the situation, they would almost laugh at it. Okay. Sorry, it's embarrassing, right? It's embarrassing. Okay. It's that bad, you know, where you have a situation where people are being a little antagonistic, a little angry, a little catty, a little conniving, but somebody thinks they're actually in danger. Okay. It looks ridiculous to us, but if you take away that and you just look at it from the other person's point of view, it's a situation where they're not calibrated in how they're perceiving reality. Okay, they're perceiving more danger and more threat than what is really there. Okay, that's classic paranoia. In terms of the personality disorder spectrum, not talking about paranoid schizophrenia. Okay, that's different. All right. So basically, this tendency to misperceive and to overperceive danger, and also to misinterpret. Okay, and also I think another quality of paranoid people is they jump really really quick and they start responding on the assumption of more threat than what there really is. Okay, that's number one. A second aspect of paranoia that I think is really important is that paranoid people in this spectrum, not the schizophrenics, okay, but in this personality spectrum of paranoia, um, people tend to have a very tenacious sense of personal right. Okay, very tenacious sense of their own personal right. Okay, and I think that pretty much describes what Lauren is experiencing. Okay, somehow, you know, with maybe just the stress of going to all these trials, and frankly, I think maybe if you want to say maybe the trigger for all this, I think maybe what really caused all this is I think Lauren came from a competitive news industry. Okay, she was in the industry of news. Not she's not like a homemade, home baked, you know, sleuth from home. She's really comes from the industry. Okay, so she probably brought from the industry this kind of cutthroat competitiveness. All right, and I guess that's just the nature of news. You know, the news business is cutthroat, and she didn't come from like say true crime news. She came from mainstream news. Okay, so she comes from mainstream news with this really, I think, just a natural cutthroat competitive attitude. Okay, and she just comes bulldozing into this environment of just like mothers and just homemade people, you know, ordinary people just doing their true crime stuff, and it's just like a bulldozer effect. And so I think that she just comes with this major competitiveness, And I think that as it sort of developed in the way she's been dealing with people socially, I think it's just kind of brought up this really paranoid situation for her, okay, where she is just now maybe kind of traumatized, I guess, by maybe not fitting in so well, or maybe she maybe is she's like caused a lot of wreckage by coming in with her competitiveness, and it's almost like she's trying to make sense of all this like debris and all this like wreckage, basically. And it's sort of like she knows that there's been an accident. It's like she drove this like semi truck and she had this big explosion, and now she's like, wait a minute, there's been an accident. So she knows it's like traumatic, and she knows there's like something going on, and this is arousing her paranoia, basically. She's trying to make sense of it, you know. But you can, I think that the most telltale sign is just that tenacious feeling of personal right, okay, personal righteousness, you know. And I think she and John kind of play off each other in that way, and they kind of really kind of tease out and sort of exacerbate this paranoid position. And the other huge aspect of paranoia that is just in spades here. I mean, look, I'm not trying to make fun, but it is so evident, you know. And I think anybody who's friends needs to try to reach out, I think, to Lauren, because you know it's obvious. I think it's kind of obvious what's going on. But the the other hallmark characteristic of a paranoid person is they're terribly litigious. They're very litigious. They go to court for everything. They litigate everything. And if they don't litigate, they send emails that look like lawsuits. Okay, they'll send you like a text message, but the language of the text message looks like a formal cease and desist letter. You know, and that is just a classic symptom of paranoia. You know what I mean? Now, if somebody gives you maybe one or two emails that are kind of litigious sounding, I'm talking about if it's all the time, if it's pervasive. Okay, and sadly, I mean, I feel embarrassed for Lauren, you know, and I hope nobody takes this as an insult, right? But even in her 9-hour stalking video, when she even shows her own text messages, okay, some of her text messages sound like and look exactly like, you know, the flow. They have the basic flow and the feeling of like a cease and desist letter, okay? And then the other thing is that for Lauren, it just seems so natural. You know, hey, I go to this trial where there's all these nice ladies, you know, all these mothers, and it's like going to a bake sale. And yeah, you know, I have to write a cease and desist. I have to write a cease and desist letter here and there. I had an ex contractor who was working with me, probably some young girl, you know. Oh yeah, you know, I had to write her a cease and desist letter. Look, you're not working for General Motors. You know, you're not working for NBC. You know what I mean? This is just like the bake sale world. This is the world of moms and you know going to you know doing some true crime stuff. It's more of a community kind of situation. You don't want to be writing a lot of cease and desist letters in this environment. You know, yeah, you have a YouTube channel, but you got to be careful. You know, it's just a YouTube channel. You're not. It's not NBC. It's not a network. It's just a homegrown thing. You know what I mean? So I think Lauren, she feels so natural. You know, oh, I'm going to the courts. You know, I'm the courts are going to help me. You know, she doesn't realize she's unleashing like superhuman powers. You know, the courts have more power than a human being. You know, it's bigger than human. It's like titanic power. You know what I mean? And she's so casual about it. And I just think that you know I have to think twice because I have to remember that she's in a paranoid situation, and paranoid people, they are just very litigious. Okay, that's just a typical characteristic. Um, and unfortunately, like I don't know if John is actually a paranoid person, but he kind of feeds into it because I think John feels very righteous in accessing the courts and trying to invoke court powers on people. Okay, and if you invoke those things based on, let's say, a fundamentally paranoid perspective, there is something kind of wrong about that. You know what I mean? I mean, you should be first going to your psychologist and getting recalibrated before you actually go invoking the powers of the court, let alone spending your own money. I don't even want to imagine how much of John and Lauren's money has been wasted on too much litigation, you know, and overpaying their attorneys. And I almost think shame on their attorneys for letting them do it. You know what I mean? It's really sad. But bottom line is litigiousness and you know hyper litigiousness is a huge hallmark of a paranoid person. Okay, and so this is why I'm kind of downgrading the narcissism, because yes, she does have narcissistic issues. But if you really think about it, the main billboard here, the big characteristics are really paranoid. You know what I mean? So the other classic thing about paranoid people is they tend to revert to just a natural kind of a baseline of mistrust. Okay, and so in the way they perceive people in the world, just kind of the pervasive attitude is sort of easy to mistrust. That's just kind of their default. And I just think when you combine that with Lauren's natural competitiveness, now please don't blame her so much for being competitive. She came from the industry of mainstream news. Okay, she's gonna be competitive. That's where she comes from. So let's not blame her for it. Let's try to understand her. But I think it's in this particular situation, it's had a way of sort of opening up a lot of paranoia, and I think it's just obvious how much paranoia is playing into all this. Okay, the next thing I noticed with Lauren is probably related to paranoia, but I think a lot of people that have developmental issues and especially social issues, I think a lot of us that are not very well socialized, or we're just kind of, I think it happens a lot with people that are very intelligent. I've seen a lot of kind of nerdy, let's say nerdy people who just they don't feel comfortable, like completely comfortable in just regular social situations with ordinary, normal people, okay, average people, right? I think some people, they just have a lot of trouble becoming completely disarmed and really informal with just regular people, okay? And so we're talking about like that thing of becoming disarmed, just being completely disarmed and disarmed and just informal with people, okay? It's now for most people that's natural, okay, and that's kind of sad. Isn't that sad that there are some people, and I include myself, I really struggle with this too, because I'm a nerd, like maybe not as bad as John. John is smarter than me. He is really a smart guy. That guy, I'm sorry, his SAT verbal would have been in the 700s. Okay, I guarantee it. John, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me your SAT verbal wasn't above 760. Okay, tell me it wasn't. Tell me you didn't get a 770 in the verbal SAT or higher when you were in high school. Don't tell me you got a 790 or an 800. I'll bet he did. But anyway, this guy is really smart. All right. And so people like that, they are not normal. Okay, they're not normal. Okay, those of us, and I'm not even normal. Okay, but those of you guys out there that are just like regular average people, right? Just normal people. You guys, your baseline is informal. You know what it's like to be informal, informality, right? Well, for most people, that's for most people. But like say for people that are kind of special, people that are more intelligent, that come from Ivy League families, that are kind of maybe not even that, just weird, smart people, geeky, nerdy people. Okay, those people, it is really special for them and very hard for them to be completely disarmed and be completely informal. Okay, and so I don't think that's just paranoia, although I'm sure paranoid people really, really struggle with that. But I noticed with Lauren that I think she tries so hard. She tries so hard just to be a regular gal, just a regular gal, and I have feelings and I love you and I have feelings. And I think she doesn't process fully, and I don't think she fully takes into account that she is really trying to imitate that. She's trying to fit into that, okay? Because naturally for her, I think Lauren is a little more guarded with people, and she's not really a populist. She's not a riffraff, normal ass girl that's just going to the bar and getting drunk and just having friends and going to the casino and playing slot machines and being with other girls. I think Lauren is kind of a stuffy, uptight girl that was raised by a father who probably went to an Ivy League university, and you know what I mean? She's not really normal person. She's not a normal gal. You know what I mean? And so I think she really wants to show her feelings and share her empathy and be nice and connect. And I have feelings, but she doesn't properly understand that she's trying to relate to regular people. And she is not really of the people that are really like informal. She is more formal. Okay. And so I think Lauren has a lot of issues regulating her informality. Okay, so What the problem is that her baseline is not really informal. Okay, maybe in her own house with her own family, with her own people, she has her own version of informality. But out in the populist world, the regular world of regular people, I don't think Lauren is really, her baseline is really to be really informally connected with people. Okay, so she tries to because she knows that's how to fit in, but she doesn't realize she's imitating. And when you get into imitation, it's a trap because that's not really your baseline. Okay, so you're going to flip out of your baseline and it's going to shock people and it's going to make other people be like, whoa, what's up? Like that was out of nowhere, you know, and it's going to make other people react and they're not going to like it. Okay, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. So I think that Lauren has to really deal with the fact that she doesn't come from a regular homespun, you know, salt of the earth background. She's not really a normal gal, you know, and she's trying to relate to all these bake sale people and normal kind of just average women that are just going to the, you know, the trials and following their true crime. That's kind of a, like say a folk level community. That's folksy people, folk people, you know. And Lauren is really not of a folk category. She's above that, you know. And so, and she's not faking that she's above it. She really was born into a higher level, kind of a more upper class. Not up, she's not upper class. But she comes from a more. She's not like a really a true average grassroots person. Okay, she's not. Okay, and so she needs to work on that because she has dysregulated informality because informality is not her baseline. And this is a really big problem, guys. And I'll admit that I even have this problem also. Okay, I struggle with being informal with people that I don't know very well. I have to know someone really well to be really warm and truly informal. And otherwise, I also have to fake it. And I don't like being fake. Okay, but I have to do it too. And I struggle with it myself. But Lauren has to be very careful because I think that when she, right before she gets triggered to like her full paranoid place, okay, as she starts to see a buildup, like things don't seem to be going right with other girls in her community, and things start to escalate just a little bit. I think before things go out of control, I think Lauren sometimes tries to calm things down and she tries to sort of de-escalate, but her de-escalation comes from her place of kind of very formal, kind of not really a very connected, natural, warm connection. Okay, because she's starting to feel a little bit threatened, so she gets a little bit informal with people. Or no, I'm sorry, she gets a little bit formal with people. Okay, and I do that too, where I think I'm trying to calm people down, but I'm actually becoming very like mechanical. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, okay, let's be rational now. But people perceive that as being like you're turning into a robot now. Like it makes people feel scared. It makes people feel like this is not trust. You lost the informality. So I think Lauren needs to really work on that. And I don't know how, I don't even know how to solve that in my own life because I struggle with that as well. Now, sometimes I fake it, but I don't like to be a faker. And I don't know that you want to solve problems by imitation or faking. I think that's an area where Lauren may have to go to her own therapist and maybe even John himself also like go to a therapist where they can get coaching because I don't think anybody has an easy answer to that question. In any case, okay, for people who actually do have paranoia, okay, I think that especially for people who really are paranoid, who really find themselves in a paranoid position, the issue of dysregulated informality or dysregulated formality, okay, I think it becomes a huge problem because I don't know if it's true for all paranoid people. I'm not an expert in paranoia, by the way. I really don't know the subject like a psychologist, but at least in Lauren's case, I think when she goes full formal, when she becomes formal, I think she becomes very ominous and very scary. And I don't think she realizes it. I think inside of Lauren, she feels so precious and sweet. And I think inside Lauren, I think she spends every moment of her life just being as conscientious and I think as earnest as possible. I think maybe that came from being a religious girl, you know. But I think almost every waking moment inside Lauren's own psychology, I think she feels like she's just trying to do the right thing, you know, just only trying to help, trying to relate to the victims, trying to be the nicest person I can be, only trying to do good. And I think that's why she feels like, what have I done? Because all her waking moments are nothing more than just trying to do. That's how she feels. Okay. And I think when people get into that kind of solitary, kind of like only one characteristic, they kind of bulldoze away all their other characteristics. And so they're not integrated. She's not really integrated. She doesn't really feel, I don't think she normally really feels just how that, or maybe, I don't know, maybe she does. Maybe she kind of switches out when she needs to be competitive, then she switches into competitive. And I think she feels like that's a very valid and righteous place also to be, because she was programmed that way from mainstream news. So let me correct that for a second. I think she has a part of herself that is very conscientious and very earnest. I think that's a part of her. But I think she also code switches, and I think she can switch into, let's say, the righteous competitor, because I think she was programmed in the news business to think that competition is completely legitimate, and that's just part of the business. And then maybe because she was raised in a family where there's attorneys, maybe she's been sort of inculcated in her family culture that what attorneys do and what the courts do, that's just natural, that's just normal, and kind of not really realizing that these are superhuman powers. You know what I mean? When you invoke, like, say, legal powers, you're invoking very large powers. Okay. And so okay, I think Lauren, she feels herself on the inside mostly to be just very earnest and just only trying to do the right thing, but I think she also has that competitive aspect. In any case, bottom line is, when she puts on the formality, okay, I think Lauren doesn't really realize how big it looks to other people. Okay. I think Lauren just always feels like the same person, probably kind of vulnerable, nice. I'm a nice person. I'm a good person. But I think she doesn't realize that when she puts on the formality, she looks like a 30-foot Easter Island stone giant. You know what I mean? She does. I feel her spirit becomes one of the Easter Island stone giants. She's a titanic size. I don't know. It's so unfortunate. Like, I've never seen that really with a lot of people. Like, I've worked in hardcore law firms. I've had to deal with I mean, I can't say with the circuit, but I've had to deal with like federal circuit judges, like hardcore, people in high positions and stuff. But I've never seen anybody who has such a titanic Easter Island stone giant personality, like a titanic personality. And I think when she goes into the righteous formality, like, well, if I have to invoke the court's powers, and she doesn't realize that she's unleashing this huge giant force of intimidation. And Lauren can be very intimidating because she assumes this massive giant titanic power. And I think she really needs to work on that, because I don't think in herself she feels that way at all. I think she feels like a small woman who, she probably thinks she's a strong girl, but I don't think she realized what a giant she really is. Okay. And it's just unfortunate because that combines, I think, with her facial enchantment. And now, granted, like, look, Lauren is not the only person who has facial enchantment. I think the human being, one of the most important parts of a human being, just like chimpanzees, is the face. The face is a very important aspect of the human charm and the human enchantment. Enchantment is part of the currency of how we relate to each other and how we get attention, how we maybe it enhances maybe our rhetoric as we are convincing with people and maybe expressing with people. The face is a vehicle, and actors use it, politicians use it, regular people use it. But I think sometimes people fall into like an exaggerated facial enchantment, where you're enchanted just with the face. Okay. And we want to regulate that. We don't want that to be dysregulated, because when it becomes massive and your face just starts occupying the whole, brain space of everything you're doing, people are going to interpret that as you're being so self-absorbed. Okay. Where in the past, Lauren would be part of the story, where it'd be like, okay, Lauren is helping us, see like all this stuff in Idaho around the Daybell murders. Like, oh wow, there's Julie Rowe. There's all these people that know Julie Rowe. We're going to do this interview. We're going to interview this cousin. And so Lauren was just kind of hosting us to see a world. Okay, but now it's like somehow Lauren's face has gotten so big, and I think this is facial enchantment, that somehow that kind of also plays on that thing in her spirit, where she becomes this 30-foot Easter Island stone giant. You know what I mean? And so that has a way of sort of combining with her facial enchantment where it becomes really overwhelming, where it's no longer, hey, Lauren's going to help us go out into the world and we're going to have interviews with all these cousins and all these friends. It's more like, this is Lauren's face, and Lauren's face is going to talk about something in the world. You know what I mean? So I think it would be really helpful maybe for Lauren to kind of catch that and maybe go back to like taking us out in the world, not in her face. You know what I mean? Like, let's focus on the things that Lauren could help us with. You know what I mean? Like, she may have to go to a psychologist to deal with maybe some of her social problems, because I think she has social problems. Okay, but what is she good at? I think one of Lauren's biggest gifts, and I think something I really miss about the old Lauren, is how she takes us places. Lauren is just a magician. She's like a wizard at like taking us places and taking us to a story. You know what I mean? I would love to see Lauren someday come on, have a new thing where we're not seeing her face so big, and we could just start with a screen where it's like we can see like a strip mall, like somewhere in let's say Utah, and she can say, hey, this is the Home Depot on so and so Avenue, in blah 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 town, and this is the Home Depot where Corey Richens met this guy, and her life would change forever, and in this video, we're going to talk to a couple of employees that I found, some ex-employees from the Home Depot that actually knew Corey Richens back in the day before she got married. You know what I mean? Like, wow. And so, hey, we're gonna, maybe she goes to a park, or maybe she goes inside somebody's house, or maybe they sit in a diner or whatever, and they talk, and we get to hear like, who is Corey Richens? You know what I mean? Or wouldn't it be cool if Lauren spent the money and went to North Carolina, and maybe she could meet people who know the Richens, where Corey really, her family is from. I think it's North Carolina. If I'm wrong, whatever, or maybe one day she could say, hey, here I am today in another part of Utah. And today we're going to talk with somebody who knew James Craig in dental school, or maybe at university, or maybe in high school. Like, hey, who is this guy, James Craig? Tell us the story. I think that is where I think Lauren really brings us in contact with like the backstory of all these true crime situations. You know what I mean? And I think we're all really curious. I want to know who Corey Richens is. I want to know who she was before she got married. I want to know what her coworkers at the Home Depot really thought of her. That is the curiosity I think I have as someone who likes true crime. And I think Lauren really knows how to deliver that. You know what I mean? She can really deliver something that people want, and it really helps them process these stories. But I think as Lauren has become kind of like this victim sympathy advocate, I mean, that's kind of her thing. That's not really, I don't know. I mean, look, I understand that. I think some people maybe want that, but I think I hate to see her lose, or this like, oh, I'm just going to this trial, I'm going to that trial, and she just goes courthouse to courthouse. I think she does better by focusing on the backstory and giving us these precious interviews that nobody else can get. So hey, that's just my 2 cents. But anyway, look, I think I was a little too hard on Lauren in the last video, just because I'm trying also to process this, okay? And I did have a reaction, okay? I don't like in her video where she says, my stalker. It turned me off, okay? I had to get over that, all right? I don't like that because Lauren's sophisticated, and she knows that at this point, without an adjudication, she doesn't have a stalker. She has an alleged stalker, okay? She has an alleged stalker. So that's kind of a fundamental dishonesty, and it really kind of it took me time to get over that, okay? But I'm over that. And I just think we need to, I hope, put ourselves in her shoes. Whatever's happening, it's all coming out of a difficulty that Lauren has in perceiving the world. Okay, she's not calibrating, or Laura's in a situation where she's not calibrating how she perceives things. Okay, and I think in her marriage with John, I think John is also not really having a calibrated perception. So these people they're almost like they have an impairment right now. Okay, so why can't we just hold out the best for them? And I personally wish, anybody in Utah or in Mormon country, whatever, LDS country, can you please talk to John DeLynn? And I think that John DeLynn needs to invite all these people to have like hour by hour mediations where they can just mediate, have a mediation with Lori Hellis, have a mediation with Christina, have a mediation with whoever, and just have some healing, have some healing. I think Lauren would want that, and I think they should have John in there too, in the Mormon Story studio, and just go through some therapy, do it publicly, because I think it would really help all of us really heal, you know what I mean? And I think John DeLynn, he's the only person I can think of that has the magic, who's big enough, and I think who Lauren respects, who could really do some magic here, because this right now is just a train wreck, and I don't think it's necessary, because at least I can see now. I think I can see Lauren in a sympathetic light, and hopefully the people that are close to her can reach out to her in that light. So anyway, appreciate your patience, and thanks for watching.